Over the course of the OP13 season, I played ace at 3 major events and won a combined 23-4 in Swiss, 8-1, 8-1, and 7-2. And if you ask a lot of people why ace is good, they'll tell you the same thing. The deck plays itself, you just follow curve. Today I want to explain my mindset around breaking the curve and why that's actually the most important skill that you can have in ace. One of the most damaging misconceptions about ace is that it's a low decision deck. People think ace wins because you play a searcher, then you play Marco, then you play Jozu, then you play I Am Whitebeard, and then you chain 10 cost Newgates until eventually you play Roger. And while this play does sometimes come into effect, when you actually look at ace games, a lot of the losses come as a result of people failing to defect from this curve. You're best served when defining your sequencing by your opponent's plays on their next 1 or 2 turns. Let's start with talking about how ace's curve can just naturally be meant to deviate from the typical Marco into Jozu into I Am Whitebeard. Specifically against Emu on the 6th Dawn turn, it's almost always the case that it's better to play Yamato over Jozu. This is because Yamato allows you to draw 2 cards, as well as still have a Dawn attached to your leader for when Emu inevitably uses Mars, or potentially Najjuro. And by playing Yamato, you're also facilitating a 7 swing from both a Marco that you probably played on 4 and your leader. This as opposed to Jozu, which you could bounce your 1 or 2 searchers, but then you're just opening yourself up to be punished by Shirahoshi. You have no Dawn on leader, so when your opponent uses Mars, you're going to draw 1 less card off of Marco, and you're inclined to still counter the swings at your life because you don't have a Dawn and your Marco probably already died. If your Emu opponent plays correctly on the next turn and has the right cards, they're going to want to swing 8 then 6 at your Marco, and you're going to want to counter both those swings before they play Mars to then kill your Yamato. There's also a potential that if they don't have Mars, they'll play Najjuro, and you can just let your Marco go right away because it's going to be reduced down to 4 and take your 3 cards and then protect your life. Also within the vein of playing against Emu, you want to defect from the curve on your 10 Dawn turn when you're going second, because you want to play Roger there. Oftentimes people make the mistake of just continuing to chain their Newgates, waiting until they feel comfortable with enough Newgate swings that they can go for game with Roger as well. But I think that move is being overly defensive, and you're much better served just after you play I Am Whitebeard on 8 Dawn and put out a Newgate, you just play a Roger on 10 Dawn. This is not only extremely effective aggressively, because as soon as you get to 0, and you can get to 0 and survive a few turns still, all of your swings are unblockable for them, so their blockers become much less effective and they're not able to draw their card from War Curie. So it's effective aggressively. Also, just being able to put forward that 13 swing before they've played any 10 costs is effective. It's also effective defensively, because they're not going to want to put you to 0 and open up already these possibilities of unblockable attacks. One of the primary errors I see ace players making that allowed me to win against a lot of aces while going first is that they choose to play I Am Whitebeard into Newgate on 8 Dawn every single time. And I understand that as like a last approach, but almost always I'm going to want to play Jozu there to bounce their Jozu. This is because if you play the I Am Whitebeard, you're just opening yourself up to being punished by Red Rock, which will then allow them to swing 8 with leader and 8 with Jozu, and leaving you with no board. And that punishment is just way too great, especially if you try to play another Newgate and they Red Rock again, the game is basically over. You want to just continue the Jozu chain and take advantage of the fact that you're going second, so you'll be the first one who's able to play both Jozu and Pudding together. by playing the new gate on 8 Dawn, you're just gambling that either your opponent doesn't have Red Rock or doesn't know that it's the best play there. While playing Ace, it's good to be cognizant of what swings your opponent is going to be making on the next turn so that you can figure out when to optimally put a Dawn on leader. If your opponent is just going to be doing 6s that you know you're going to want to counter out of, then oftentimes you can forego attaching the Dawn. Quite frequently on 4 Dawn, the best play is just to play Marco. And it's okay that you do that because you know your opponent's going to want to establish something on 5 Dawn as opposed to just swinging 10. But if you do know that your opponent just wants to swing big, sometimes you're going to want to change things around so that you can have the Dawn on your leader. But it's also important to not be wary of big swings when your opponent inevitably is going to have to curve out. I see a lot of people being scared that 2 things can happen at once, that somehow their opponent is both going to still be in the game with an established board, but also be able to use all their Dawn for swinging. Against Emu, my philosophy with taking life is oftentimes if I'm going second, my first life is taken very easily because I'm happy to just dig towards all my resources in my curve, and you know what kind of pressure points they're going to be able to put on you based on how big their board is going into turns that can potentially play Jupiter. And something to be considerate of is that Emu can't Jupiter and 10 cost in the same turn, so they're not both going to be able to put the Jupiter pressure and do the necessary effects of the 10 cost. But if I'm going first against Emu, I try my best to be extremely protective of my life because I like to be able to play as many I Am Whitebeards and buff my leader as possible. It's a lot harder to sneak in a Roger the way that you can almost always play a Roger on 10 Dawn going second. But if your opponent has a turn where they're missing pressure, you always want to be considerate of, can I fit Roger in here? One of the most important things in Ace is knowing how to effectively use I Am Whitebeard. One of the biggest mistakes you can make, which I saw round 8 at Peoria happen to one of my friends, is play I Am Whitebeard and take the life and fail to actually put out a new gate. So I hope that you're above the level of making that mistake. But the best way to use it is oftentimes on 8 you just use it and you don't take the life because your opponent is only going to have swing from one character on board in their leader, which means usually you just have to give one card for one of those swings and then the other one is free blocked. So by buffing your leader there, you're oftentimes just wasting your life. But there are times when taking the life, even in a scenario like that, is still worthwhile just in order to be able to apply the added pressure that 10k leader becomes. So it's important to consider exactly how far you are away from potentially closing out the game, because sometimes just that little bit of added pressure on 8 Dawn or 10 Dawn is worth it. Also, with the 8 cost event, if you are taking life, probably that means that your opponent has at least 3 characters on board. So if your opponent has less than 3 characters on board and you're considering taking the life, you really have to ask yourself why you feel that that's necessary. And it can be, as I said before, just as simple as needing to have 2k more extra pressure. But you just have to be considerate of that and know that's the reason that you're taking the life. Ace is a lot more than just its most basic curve. It rewards players who know how to effectively deviate from curve and know why they're doing it. So sometimes it's important to not just be considerate of curve, but be considerate of all your potential moves and why you think what you're doing is the best choice. Because then after the game you can ask yourself the question, what could I have done differently and why did I make the choices I made? And then you can discuss those with people as opposed to just always worrying about curve and saying that a win or a loss is defined solely because you saw or didn't see this one piece on this one turn. Oftentimes, right now, that can be put towards I Am Whitebeard on 8 against Emu, And I've won plenty of games where I missed that. It's just about figuring out what your best options are as a result of your hand and the current board state. If you want more breakdowns like this, especially leading into nationals, let me know what you want to see. Thank you.